Yo, what is up, guys? I am Josh, and this is #LifeChoices.
I am Anath. This is the podcast where we aim to help you make the best life choices.
I am David, here to welcome you to Situational Saturdays.
And lastly, I am Lemuel, and this is our weekly segment where we talk about different situations we face in life.
We take both real and hypothetical situations from you guys and ask each other, if you were in this situation, what would you do? And our situation for today is something that we all face. Well, actually, most of us, especially if you're within our generation, social media, technology surrounds us and basically hounds us every single day begging for attention. And our situation comes from someone who struggles from cell phone addiction, and he says it is affecting his life. He's struggling with his studies, he's having a difficulty connecting with other people, and this has really become more than just an isolated problem, but has affected a lot of his life. So we just want to throw out that question to the whole group, and maybe if you guys want to contribute to the discussion, you could comment. But basically, what are practical ways that we could face and battle cell phone addiction? Let's help out this friend and show him how we could better use technology around us.
I would like to put another emphasis on the problem because I see my sibling, I won't name who, would study.
I think I know who.
That sibling would study and then after 2 minutes would look at the phone and then would go back to studying and then look at the phone, like scrolling. And then, people are like that and they would think that they're studying, but they're really not. There's what you call context switching, and it's actually making you lose more time that you think. And the big problem here is that nothing retains in your memory and you're so distracted. And probably the reason why is because when you're studying, it's not easy, right? And it gives you this sort of pain. And social media or whatever it is on your phone tries to relieve you, quote unquote, of that pain by offering you a little bit of pleasure. But that's shallow pleasure. The real pleasure comes from actually being productive. And phone addiction makes you very, very, very unproductive in a lot of ways. I know you would agree with me.
It's called multitasking.
No, multitasking. Studies have shown that multitasking does not exist because you have to switch from one task to the next, and your brain has to take a lot of time and energy to do that switching. And I'm not just talking about you, Lem. I'm talking about to our listeners out there who
Is this
think they're
friend me?
quote unquote multitasking.
Our friend wanted to remain anonymous. Did you want to remain anonymous, Lam?
Your friend, I meant. So let's go back to your friend.
Yeah, so my
Let's
friend
name this friend Lem.
Lam. No. Let's name this friend Mel.
Okay, sure.
Just to hide his name a little bit. So Mel is facing cell phone addiction.
I just like to say that I
Let's help
identify
Mel.
with Mel's problem.
Okay.
I catch myself oftentimes stuck on my phone to the point that I bring it to the toilet.
A lot of people.
Yes, a lot of people do. And that reminds me, I had David over at my place a week ago. And then he said he needed to use the toilet. And I was wondering what was taking him a long time. I knew he had a bad stomach. But then at some point, yes, he did. But at some point, I was in the dining room and the toilet's probably a few meters away. And suddenly, out of nowhere, I hear laughs from the toilet. And I was like,
He was having a good time.
He was having a good time. That was
Who
a
would
good
laugh
poop.
in the toilet? And I was messaging Josh saying, "Oh man, I'm stuck in traffic. It will take a while." Yeah, that was really bad.
So Mel's problem is a real problem.
Yes, it's a real problem. It's something we all face. I once heard a talk where it outlined why this is such a huge problem, because when we look at our phones, we get a surge of oxytocin, which is like a happy hormone. Which
we're talking medicine.
yes, we're talking medicine.
Is it medicine?
I don't know. It's something. It's something about the
We
body.
need the guest on. So if any of you would like to guess,
Yeah,
be our sponsor on Patreon.
Yeah, so basically there's a release of oxytocin, which is a good hormone, and once it gets released by seeing notifications pop up, by seeing photos being liked, we constantly search for it. So I don't know if you guys experience this, but I experience this when I'm going through my day. I feel that my phone vibrates, but when I look at it, it actually doesn't. It's called a phantom vibrate because your brain is trying to look for that sensation that you got when you saw notifications, you saw likes, oxytocin. Your brain constantly searches for that because you have conditioned it to think that way. Now, Mel, who is facing the situation, wants to figure out how can we beat that system? How can we retrain our brains so much so that this doesn't affect all of our lives? And I think that is something that is huge because it affects not only studies, it affects relationships. I think one of the most common problems in today's society is people in the dinner table or any dining table wherein basically everybody's just on their phone and nobody's talking.
You know, that's actually really sad when I see people, especially families or friends, coming together to eat outside and everyone's just on the phone. There's no interaction. It's like a waste of time and memories, you know?
Yeah, that's Ena's pet peeve. He doesn't like people on their phones when talking to
Yeah.
him. So if you guys ever meet Ena, throw your phone away. Don't bring it in his
Don't even
presence.
have it on your person.
Yeah. So let's ground this topic and let's
Okay,
shoot out
yeah.
practical tips. What are practical tips, practical ways that we could deal with this problem of cell phone addiction?
Okay, so I'll start it off. And,
All right, Mel.
Yeah, no.
My bad. Sorry, Lem.
Okay. So to Mel, I would give this advice. There was one time when I left my phone at home and I found myself walking around the mall. I was going with my family, itching to get on my phone, but it simply wasn't there. So at one point, I was asking myself, why am I so frustrated? And I realized that, hold on, is this thing lording over my life to that extent that I can't even go a day without looking at it? And so when I realized I was kind of addicted to it, I kind of wanted to prove that wrong. And the rest of the day, I spent actually doing something I should have been doing all along, which was enjoying the moment with my family. And
good.
it's like what David mentioned earlier. It's sad that you're there in person with people important to
But
you.
in your mind,
but
you're elsewhere.
Yeah, you're smiling at a digital presence.
Yeah.
And I know they're your friends as well, but this is something you should definitely cherish because in person is still different than a digital chat with someone. And so that day went along and I found myself actually kind of free. I did prove to myself that, hey, one day I was able to go through it without a phone, and I quite enjoyed it as well. Getting to catch up with my mom on things we couldn't have talked about if I was on my phone.
Yeah, and that is very good because we have to take our attention away from these devices because you could always get back to that. You could go back to your text, your messages in your free time.
Your Candy Crush.
Your Candy Crush. And that's a
very old game.
Yeah, that's very old. That's really showing your age. Yeah, but basically it takes our attention away from things that matter. We miss out on crucial moments. We miss out on such important things. And I want to throw out a very practical tip out there, and this is something that I only started recently but has actually really been beneficial to me. I downloaded this app. It's called You Behind. So behind is UBHIND. So it's UB and then hind. And basically what this app does is you can set a timer for each application that you use. And once that time limit is finished, you can no longer open that application for the day. So basically, I outlined the most important apps for me not the most important app, but the most distracting apps for me. So I took stuff like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Netflix, and I set a time limit. So for some, I set 1 hour. So for some, I set 30 minutes. Because sometimes I get lost scrolling on Facebook and I just go on and on and on, and I don't realize so much time has passed by. But with this application, if I reached 1 hour scrolling on Facebook, it will lock out that application for the whole day, and I won't be able to use it anymore. So it's really good exercise in self-control, and you could actually set a passcode, and that passcode you could ask someone else to put it so you're not tempted to go back and turn it off. And it has more features than that. Another feature that I use is it's a time-based lock. So say for example, past 9 o'clock, I cannot use, not even within the 1 hour period that I have allotted, I cannot use at all Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Netflix. And that allows me to have a more...
It allows you to break the habit.
It allows you to break the habit, and allows me to rest more calmly, knowing that I'm not looking at notifications, I'm not waiting for posts or anything. I can just relax.
But coming from the psyche, maybe, if that's the correct term, of someone who's addicted to this thing, once you get that thing preventing you from getting your fix, if you call it that, you start itching. You're just so uncomfortable. For some reason, I can't relate. There should be, what do you call this? At least in my experience, I'm not able to sit still. There has to be something that consumes your attention, or else you're just there itchy for activity. And that's where my suggestion comes in. Try to invest in another activity or hobby to occupy your time. Because the thing is, I learned with passions and addictions, you can't just stop them, especially if you've been dependent on it for so long. If I use the terminology for a drug, you have to fill it or replace it with something else. So in the context of maybe Mel's situation, he can do other things he likes, like tennis, maybe play some chess, or even watch a movie or something.
These suspiciously sound like your hobbies. Tennis,
Wait,
chess.
no. A lot of people like those things.
But those things in combination, I don't know.
Yeah, it's well, you know.
All right, Lam. But I wanted to introduce that app as a way to transition through that cell phone addiction, because
Yeah,
sometimes we cold turkey it, which is literally just stopping.
Yeah.
So that is why, for me, I'm still addicted to my application. So I set a 1 hour limit to give myself that opportunity to still access those apps. But you're right.
Definitely though. So for that, we have to break the habit first, because people. It's a miracle actually that Mel realizes he's in the addiction, because most people, they don't want to get out of it. They're in denial even. And so that thing forces you to stop the cycle. And once you've stopped the cycle, you can restart another cycle, like a better habit. Replace it with something else. Fill your life with something more meaningful.
Yeah, and this is something that I've actually been doing recently. Oh, and by the way, we are not sponsored by you behind there.
Yeah, not sponsored.
It's actually an iPhone variant, but it's already pre-installed.
If you guys want to sponsor us, lifechoicesph@gmail.com. No problem with us.
So I have a 10 to 15 minute walk from my apartment to school every morning and on the way back too. And initially, oftentimes what I'd be doing was I would be using my phone during this walk, replying to messages, scrolling through Instagram. That was how I would walk to school. My eyes would be glued to my phone. So recently I started listening to audiobooks on the way to school. And I find that the desire to suddenly look at my phone is no longer there, because what happened previously is, just like Josh mentioned, the ghost vibrations, I used to feel those. And every 10 seconds I was pulling my phone out of the pocket to look and see if there were notifications, and there weren't any. But the moment I started either listening to an audiobook or listening to music, now my attention is focused on what I'm hearing rather than what I'm seeing on my phone. And as a result, there was no more desire to look at my phone. And so that's exactly what you said. Find something else to replace the desire to look at your phone. And audiobooks, music, those are very...
Podcasts?
Podcast.
Amazing.
Just a thought.
Yes.
can really help you keep your focus on that instead of on your phone. And this will really help reduce your time spent on social media. And as a result, because this has been happening for a couple of weeks now, I actually find myself not on social media as often as I used to be. So there would be times where I would think, oh, have I opened Instagram today? And the answer would be no, because I was doing other things. And so as a result, when you build this new habit of something that's more productive, something that's more beneficial to you, like the Life Choices podcast,
Very beneficial.
Very good suggestion.
Very.
as a result, now the focus is shifted and you will soon be developing new and healthier habits so that addiction will slowly disappear.
Yeah, and I always say this to people. People sometimes look for a power bank, look for a charger or somewhere to plug their phones in. But I would always say that the best battery saving measure is good company. Find people that you could spend time with, and you won't realize that at the end of the day, your phone has 90% battery because you spent it with people you genuinely enjoy. And yeah,
I relate to that so much because I was with a group of friends on Tuesday and I complained that my battery life is bad on a normal day, but I had finished hanging out with them and I still had 50%, and I was like, whoa. That's amazing. And that's because I didn't have any need to check my phone. And I also want to add to that, we tend to believe that we need to respond to things, that we need to be active on social media, but you really don't. People don't need a response immediately. You can take the day to be off social media and reply to messages in the night. No one is looking for immediate responses from you. And so when we start realizing that and knowing that there is no expectation for us to be online all the time, then the desire and the need to be online slowly disappears, right?
If it's truly urgent, it will find it will find ways to get you more immediately than in social media.
Yeah.
And I would like to add this tip that I do. It's called fasting. And so fasting, usually you think it's about food, right? But it can also apply to phone addiction. So that means it's denying yourself one thing for another thing that's much better. And in my case, in my personal case, it's prayer. Substituting, for example, eating one meal with a time to pray. And in this case, you can substitute like your time with your cell phone to something even better. It could be spending time with your family, or praying, or spending time with your friends.
Yeah, and we were talking about how you don't need to respond to these things. You don't have to urgently reply to everyone. But if you're worried that that will happen, there is actually a feature on most phones right now. It's called Do Not Disturb. And for some people, you don't know how it works, so you think it will just reject all notifications. But actually, how that works is if you receive one notification from that person, it won't alert you. There will be no notification. But if you receive two, that is the only time it will send in a notification. And why is that good? Because if it's urgent, somebody will bombard you with messages and say, hey, I need your response on this matter. But if it's not urgent and he just sent one message, then it's probably not as urgent. So you could toggle that Do Not Disturb. It's on iPhone, it's on Android, it's almost on every phone, and you could use that as a measure so that you don't get so preoccupied in the need to respond to your messages online. And wow, this is something that is very relevant in today's context because it is something that we all face, especially our generation that is so tech savvy that we know of all these social media platforms that we spend so much time in, and they have benefits. They are good, but I know of this quote where it says everything is permissible but not everything is beneficial. So social media, it is permissible, you can use it, just don't abuse it because to a certain extent it will stop being beneficial to you. So at this point, let's just recap everything we've discussed in this program, and then it'll be time to say goodbye to our podcast listeners. So first, social media offers us shallow pleasures. It's not very fulfilling. You just read something, you see a nice post, that's the only pleasure you get. Those shallow pleasures actually fuels your body with this hormone called oxytocin, which causes you to want to seek out that thing more and more and more. And things like the phantom vibrate happens where there's actually no notification, but you feel a vibrate because you've gotten so hooked with it. So what are practical tips that you can do to be able to curb this addiction to social media and cell phones? So first is use apps to limit your time. I know Apple has it built in, it's called Screen Time. Android, they have a whole host of other apps. I personally use UBehind, and we're not sponsored by these, but these apps are actually good for curbing that addiction because it's not immediate. You don't cut off access to that quote-unquote drug. It gets regulated over time and it's not an immediate cut of your pleasures. And second is build healthy habits to replace social media. Like Ena said, he has built the habit of listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks, and the most important thing that we always want to push is spend time with friends because good company is the best battery saver. When you're with good company, you don't really look at your phone, you just spend time enjoying your day. So much so that Ena's phone, which actually has bad battery in his opinion, had 50% at the end of the day because he spent it with friends. And I just want to reiterate the building healthy habits to replace social media. Listen to podcasts, especially #LifeChoices.
We've plugged it so many times.
Yes, we release podcast episodes every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday. So you could fill your time with that, or you could re-listen to some episodes that happened in the past. It's up to you. And the last thing we want to say is that you don't always have to be online. We feel this pressure to always communicate with people, always look at posts, open Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and those things are good, but too much time will not be beneficial for you. You don't have to be online. Set Do Not Disturb so that you can only receive urgent communication towards you. So we just want to thank you for listening to today's podcast. And if you have a situation you want to have featured on this show, you could email us at lifechoicesph@gmail.com. And in a few days, we're actually launching our website, lifechoicesph.com. And on that website, you could look at the Submit tab. In the Submit tab, you could fill out a form, and in that form, you could also send us your situations that you want us to talk about on this show. And maybe just like Mel today, that we were able to help through a cell phone addiction, we may be able to help you face your problems by offering the different perspectives that we have in this table. And lastly, we just want to thank our sponsor,
Oh.
No
Still none.
sponsor. Still no sponsor. Yeah,
but you can sponsor or help Life Choices by
by emailing us at lifechoicesph@gmail.com and patreon.com/lifechoicesph. So, hope to have you guys back here on Monday for Movie Mondays. But before you go, we just want to remind you, in this life, we have no choice but to make choices.
So choose wisely.
See you in the next podcast.